Hey, Wicked Deke here. Join me in a moment of solemn reflection as we say goodbye to Ilya Kovalchuk. Yes, Ilya Kovalchuk. R.I.P. Rest in peace. No, he's not dead. His career. No, actually, it's just his career with the Kings. Ilya, December 15th, D-Day. The last day that he gets a big bonus from the Kings, and the expectation is he will be bought out. Now the Kings apparently have been trying to trade him, but GMs aren't idiots. They know what's going to happen, so why would they give up anything for him? Now, Ilya, a retrospective. Oh, Ilya. Remember the season was 2017-18. The Kings were back. Oh, yes, after the Stanley Cup hangover. They were playing well again. They made the playoffs. Where they played the upstart Las Vegas Knights and got swept. Now the games, if you looked at the scores, were highly competitive, very close. And so there was a thought that if the Kings could add goal scoring, they could make a legitimate cup run. And that was obviously management's view. And they went out and signed Ilya out of the KHL, where he'd been playing for, 5 years, I think. Now, there were some questions about whether management's view was correct because there were a couple things about that season and that playoff run. Well, not run, but that playoff series that raised some questions. First of all, if you remember, that was the season Jeff Carter got hurt. So he missed most of the season. And Andrei Kopitar, now let me disclose my bias. I am not the Andrei Kopitar honk that other people are. I think he's a very good player. I just don't think he's, the second coming of Jesus. But that season, he was amazing. A plus, 100, 1 out of 100. He had a season for the ages. What did he end up? 92 points. The fact that he did not win MVP of the league is a disgrace. Taylor Hall couldn't hold Andrei Kopitar's jock, particularly in that season, under any condition. Hall doesn't take face-offs. Hall doesn't play anything in the defense. It was a joke. If Kopitar had been on any East Coast team or Canadian team, he would have run away with the MVP. He was insane. Every defensive, key defensive face-off, every important face-off, critical goals, anything. He was unreal. One of the best seasons I've ever seen. And again, I'm not a huge Kopitar honk, but he really deserved it. And, the flip side of that, of course, was could you expect him to keep having those kinds of seasons? And realistically, the answer was no. I mean, he's a human being. And man, the wear and tear he suffered that year. He played insane minutes. He played every minute was important. It was just an incredible year. But realistically, there was going to be some pullback from those numbers the next year. It's just not something you can maintain. And then the second problem with that whole evaluation, I think, was that if you watch the Vegas series, well, if you look at the scores, it was a very close series. If you actually watch the games, and as a Kings fan, I know a lot of people would be subjectively thinking the Kings were great. The Knights dominated that series. And what really kept everything close was Quick. Quick was insanely good, I thought. I thought he was 2012 good. He was just playing out of his mind. And so, again, you had the question of, is that something that happened over that stretch? Because, frankly, we all know that Quick is an insane playoff goalie. Even today, if I had a team and we were starting, a first round playoff series, which goalie would I pick? Even today, I would still pick Quick because, when the lights are on and it's nervous time, that man performs. And he gets up for those games, and he is just an amazing goalie. One of the best playoff goalies, big time, big game goalies I've ever seen in my life. Remember finals against the Rangers? They go into New York, and everybody is King Lundqvist this, King Lundqvist that. And Quick was like, oh, fuck you. And comes out, shuts him out with that insane paddle save where he's on one side of the goal, flips his stick up and stops. I don't remember who was shooting it. 2,000 New York Ranger fan hearts burst at that moment. It was one of the great plays. I loved it. He came out and just shoved it down New York, all their media and everybody else's throat. Oh, yeah? King who? King who? I love Jonathan Quick. Even to this day, I love Jonathan Quick. But again, was he going to put up that kind of performance over the next season? You know, management obviously thought that he was. But, at some point we have to start recognizing that not every game from a goalie or from Anže can be, the stellar affair. That's just not the way it works. But anyways, the answer was, let's go find some goal scoring. And Ilya was the big prize. Now, in the Kings' defense, Blake and Luke were not the only people that thought Ilya was a potential solution. There were other teams that thought he was. Boston was, pretty serious about him. And so this wasn't a situation where the Kings just randomly went off and found somebody. Now, they bring him in, and the expectation was, maybe he scores, 25 goals or so a year? I think that's what they were talking about, was the big hope. But realistically, it was more a matter not of the goals scored, but when they were scored and how they were scored. And specifically, the idea here was that Ilya would come in and light up the power play. Because if you look at the modern NHL, 5-on-5 skating with structured video and everything else, 5-on-5 skating often doesn't really decide games anymore. What really decides is power play and penalty kill. And obviously, Ilya wasn't going to play penalty kill, so we can just mark that off. But the thought was, if he can come in and bomb away and fill the net on the power play, that could be what makes the difference. And it's a pretty logical thought. I think that makes sense. And Ilya traditionally had bombed away on the power play. A lot of us thinking stick him in the Ovechkin position and let him just crank it away. Obviously, that didn't happen. And I think ultimately that was the downfall of Ilya. Yes, he didn't play defense. And I know everybody screams and yells about him not playing defense, but really, if you're complaining about that, then you're delusional, because Ilya has never played defense in his career. It's like trading for Ovechkin and then complaining he doesn't play defense. That was part of the package coming in, and management knew it. Now, the weird thing, though, is I think there's a disconnect between the players and management, because at the end of the year last year, you saw, players saying, well, we're a defensive team, DNA, defense is our DNA, it's our foundation. But you're hearing management saying, we want to get away from that. We want to play more flow, more of an offensive game, more exciting game, this kind of thing. So you have to wonder if there's a bit of a disconnect there. But Ilya was never going to play defense. I mean, at 35, really? You're going to convert him into a defensively responsible forward? Yeah, good luck with that. But I think the real problem was management thought, well, his scoring on the power play will more than make up for it. It just didn't happen. They had him out on the point a lot. It's kind of hard to score from the point, even if you have a killer shot. And sometimes we saw his shot and they put it in. Personally, I would have rather seen him in the Ovechkin position, but whatever. It didn't work out. I think that's safe to say, and his scoring on the power play didn't overcome his defensive shortcomings. Now, the weird thing is he ended up with 19 goals in 81 total games played, which isn't that far off what they were hoping for. They were hoping for 25 or so. But again, because it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of success in the power play, I think that's really what the downfall was. And he ended up a minus 36. Now, plus minus doesn't mean much, except if you're minus 36 in 81 games. I think we can point out some issues there. Now, they also didn't do him any favors, though. The whole Willie mess, what was that? Whatever you may think of Kovalchuk, let's just take Kovalchuk out of that. Can you name any coach in the NHL that would take somebody who was a very prideful, successful player historically and would shove them down onto the fourth line and give them 7 minutes a night time on ice? The only thing that's doing is embarrassing and humiliating the player. How is that supposed to work out? What's the end game there? How's that going to be some kind of positive result? The Willie experiment was strange from the word go, even leaving Ilya out of it. Bringing Willie in, just who thought that was a good idea? Where did that idea come from? And it wasn't just Kovalchuk that had issues with Willie. I mean, Mr. Quick, I think we all remember the glorious defacing of Willie in the Canes game when Quick skated to the bench, popped the mask up, and started screaming at Willie for not challenging a goaltender interference. Quick also wasn't the only person that had problems with him. Toffoli saying afterwards that practices were a joke. It sounded like Willie was kind of a disaster. And so the locker room sort of fell apart, and we have that whole thing. So ultimately it didn't work out. But It was certainly, you can see what they were thinking when they tried to pull it off. But it sounds like there's still a disconnect between management and a lot of the veterans as to what the team is supposed to look like. With McClellan now, you're seeing more of positive performance. Although, of course, it didn't work out with Ilya with McClellan either. So what's going to happen now? Well, it sounds like, according to all reports, he'll be bought out today. And then Ilya sounds like pretty decent chance he's going to sign with the Bruins. Now, obviously, the Bruins have a great record, but if you actually watch the Bruins, and I have a good friend who is a Bruins fan, so I hear it all the time, the Bruins are a very top-heavy team. Their first line is just insanely productive. David Pastrnak has something like 8,000 goals. The problem is they're getting almost no secondary scoring. They're having real problems with their secondary scoring and setting off alarms, not for the regular season, but, of course, for the playoffs. Because in the playoffs, teams often get shut down, a one-line team. Or if not shut them down, at least control them sufficiently that they can beat them. And so apparently the Bruins are desperately looking around at second, backup scoring, secondary scoring. And so it'd be interesting to see if they pick Kovalchuk up. It would cost them almost nothing, and there's almost no risk to them. And I imagine he would get a lot of power play time. And so it'd be interesting to see how that works, because one of the things about the Kings that I keep coming back to, and I don't know why or the answer necessarily, is, we all like to blame Kovalchuk for everything, but he hasn't been on the power play in a long time. He hasn't been playing in a long time. The power play still sucks. It's terrible. As a percentage, go look up the rankings. We're in the bottom 3 in the league, bottom 4, whatever it is. So if he was the entire problem, well, he's gone. How do you explain it? How do you explain the fact they're still terrible? To me, some of it's design, a lot of it's lack of talent. They don't do a lot of the things they used to do that were successful. Remember the play off the wall, down below the line to Richards or Brown, and Carter out in front of the net, pop it up to him, Carter shoots and scores. It's a basic play. You still see it run by teams that are successful in the power play. So, Oshie scored the other night doing exactly that. For some reason, the Kings don't do that anymore. If you have a power play and Ilya or I follow is on your power play, your first power play unit, you have a talent problem. You just do. It's kind of strange. Personally, I'd like to see Sean Walker pretty much on the power play and running it. And I know Doughty is hallowed and can't be taken off the power play. But personally, I'd like to see Walker run the power play. I think he'd be a better player for that. But Todd McClellan hasn't called me lately to get advice on the power play. But nonetheless, you have to look at that. And you have to wonder. The other thing you have to look at, and again, keep coming back to this, yes, the Kings have played a defensive system, but they haven't developed a forward in a decade. Not a sniping forward. Name one. Kopitar. That was really the last consistent scorer that we had. Unless you want to make an argument for Tivoli, which I wouldn't. And yes, I know, again, we are a defensive-based team. That's what we have been. But other defensive-based teams like the Blues have developed scorers. Tarasenko. So it's a bit troubling because at some point we have to find somebody who can actually snipe. And I know everybody's excited about Kaliev, but again, Kaliev is playing in the juniors. Yes, he's tearing it up in the juniors, but it is a long way from the juniors to the NHL. Again, it's kind of like going from high school football to the NFL. It's a big leap. I hope he makes it. He's definitely a goal scorer, natural goal scorer. But there are a lot of parts of his game they're going to have to massively improve for him to make the NHL level. Again, hope he does it. But he is not here next year. I've seen some people posting, will Kaliev play with the Kings next year? No, not even a chance. So anyways, maybe they end up trading for, wings like they did during the cup runs when they brought in guys like Williams and Carter and, all that. Maybe that's the solution for the Kings, because we sure have shown that we are unable to develop scoring wingers. I don't know why. Something weird in the system. But anyways, Ilya, we hardly knew ya. Deke out.